I was a decorated Army Ranger who survived 3 combat tours, but nothing prepared me for the war home. When my wife's work meetings didn't add up, my military instincts kicked in. What I discovered that rainy Thursday night shattered our marriage in an instant. My cheating wife panicked when I appeared in that dimly lit restaurant, but her lover's face turned ghost white when I mentioned his wife's name. This is how I destroyed their affair and rebuilt my life from the ashes of betrayal. My name is Owen Coleman. I'm 37 years old, and I never thought I'd be sharing a story like this. But here we are. Maybe my experience can help someone else see what I was too blind to notice. Brenda and I met in college, dated for 3 years, and tied the knot in a small ceremony in her hometown. The first few years were good. Not perfect, but good. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our favorite restaurants. We had plans for the future, talked about kids, even started saving for a down payment on a house outside the city. The office where I worked was only a 20-minute drive from our apartment, and I'd usually be home by 6:30 p.m. Brenda worked across town and would typically arrive around the same time. We'd cook dinner together, watch some TV, and call it a night. Simple, but it worked for us. Until it didn't. It started with small changes in her schedule. At first, it was just once a month when she'd text me saying she needed to stay late at the office. Then it became every other week. By the 6-month mark, it was a regular thing. Every Thursday, sometimes Friday too. Big project, she'd say. Deadline coming up. I believed her because, well, why wouldn't I? But then the weekend absences started. Suddenly, she had brunch plans with colleagues I'd never heard of. Or she needed to run errands alone because she needed some me time. Again, I didn't think much of it. Everyone needs space sometimes, right? The first real red flag came when I picked up her phone to check the time while she was in the shower. It was locked, with a passcode. Brenda had never locked her phone before. When she came out, I casually mentioned it. Hey, since when do you lock your phone? She shrugged, towel wrapped around her hair. Oh, work stuff. You know how it is. Client confidentiality and all that. I nodded, but something felt off. Her office had never required phone passwords before. But I let it slide, telling myself I was being paranoid. A few weeks later, I noticed she'd started taking her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. If she left it behind, it would buzz with notifications, but when I'd mention it, she'd quickly grab it and check in private. One evening, I was sitting on the couch when she got a text. She glanced at her phone, and I saw it. That little smile, the one that used to be reserved for me. She quickly typed a response, then put the phone face down on the coffee table. Work? I asked. Yeah, she replied, not looking up from the TV. Just confirming a meeting for tomorrow. I watched her out of the corner of my eye. Her body language had changed. She was sitting up straighter, seemed more alert. All for a work text. That night, I lay awake beside her, listening to her breathe, wondering what was happening to us. Was I imagining things? Was I just being insecure? Or was there something, or someone, I should be worried about? Little did I know, those small changes were just the beginning. The dam was starting to crack, and soon, everything would come flooding out. My military background taught me to trust my instincts. 8 years as an Army Ranger showed me that gut feelings often save lives. In Afghanistan, I'd learned to spot patterns, to notice when something was off. Now, those same instincts were screaming at me about my own marriage. I didn't want to jump to conclusions about Brenda, but I'm not the type of man who buries his head in the sand either. So I started paying closer attention. One evening, I offered to pick her up from work. It was pouring rain, and I figured she'd appreciate not having to drive. Her reaction caught me off guard. No, she said too quickly. I have to finish some things up. It might be late. Don't worry about me. I let it go, but that night, I checked her phone bill online. In the past 2 months, there was one number that appeared dozens of times. Always late at night or during her work events. Always when I wasn't around. The next red flag was her sudden interest in her appearance. Brenda had always been beautiful, but low maintenance. Suddenly she was buying new clothes, changing her hairstyle, working out more intensely. Normally, I'd be supportive of self-improvement, but this felt targeted, like she was trying to impress someone specific. You look great, I said one morning as she put extra effort into her makeup. Special day at work. Just a meeting with some clients, she replied, not meeting my eyes in the mirror. There was a time when Brenda would complain about client meetings, dreading the small talk and forced smiles. Now she seemed almost excited about them. Then came the unexplained expenses. Small withdrawals from our joint account. Nothing suspicious on its own, but they added up. When I asked about them casually, she'd give vague answers about lunches or office supplies. The final straw was her password-protected laptop. We'd always had an open device policy, not because we snooped on each other, but because we had nothing to hide. Now suddenly she was taking her laptop into another room to work, closing it whenever I walked by. One night, she left her purse on the counter while she showered. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I needed to know. I checked her wallet and found a receipt from a hotel bar downtown, from a Tuesday afternoon when she was supposedly at work. That night, I lay in bed beside her, feeling like a stranger was sleeping next to me. Part of me wanted to wake her up, demand answers. But the tactician in me knew better. In the field, you don't alert the enemy to your presence until you have all the intel you need. And right now, I needed more than suspicions. I needed proof. Friday night arrived, and with it, Brenda's usual excuse. Working late again, hon. Don't wait up. Her voice on the phone sounded rushed, distracted. In the background, I could hear office noises, or what seemed like office noises. Too perfect, almost staged. No problem, I replied casually. Good luck with the project. I hung up and checked the time. 6:15 p.m. This wasn't just another suspicion to file away. Tonight, I was taking action. From my closet, I pulled out a dark jacket and baseball cap. Nondescript clothing from my days doing surveillance work for the Army. Old habits die hard. I grabbed my truck keys, leaving my usual car in the driveway for appearance's sake. My buddy Mike had loaned me his pickup when I mentioned needing to haul some supplies. He didn't need to know the real reason. At 6:30, I positioned myself a block from Brenda's office building, engine off, watching the entrance through my binoculars. The parking lot was half empty, typical for a Friday evening. I spotted Brenda's red Mazda still in its usual spot. At 6:47, she emerged from the building. Not alone. A tall guy in a suit walked close beside her, too close that I recognized him from the last office Christmas party. David something. Marketing department. Married with 2 kids, if I remember correctly. They weren't touching, but their body language screamed intimacy. The way she leaned slightly toward him when he spoke. The way he kept finding excuses to touch her arm or shoulder. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to confront them right there, but the disciplined soldier in me held back. Wait, watch, gather intelligence. They separated at the parking lot, getting into their respective cars. I focused on Brenda's Mazda as it pulled out onto the main road. I waited 30 seconds, then followed. She didn't head home. Instead, she drove across town to a neighborhood I didn't recognize. Upscale, lots of trendy restaurants and boutique shops. She parked in a public garage. I found a spot 2 levels above, then made my way down the stairs in time to see her walking toward a restaurant called Ember. Through the window, I saw her approach a table. David was already there, 2 wine glasses waiting. They didn't shake hands or exchange friendly cheeks kisses. She sat beside him, not across. Within minutes, his arm was around her chair. I'd seen enough to confirm my suspicions, but not enough to confront her yet. This could still be explained away as a work dinner, inappropriate, but not definitive. I needed more. Something irrefutable. I returned to my truck and waited. 2 hours later, they emerged, walking closer now. His hand rested on the small of her back as they moved toward his car, not hers. I followed them to an apartment complex on the north side of town. They disappeared inside together. The final nail in the coffin of my marriage. I sat in the truck, surprisingly calm. No rage, no tears, just clarity. Now, I needed a plan. I spent the next week planning, gathering intelligence, analyzing patterns, and preparing for the confrontation ahead. In the Rangers, we learned that surprise is your greatest tactical advantage. I intended to use it. Through careful observation and checking our phone records, I confirmed that Brenda and David met regularly on Thursday nights. Their ritual was consistent. Dinner at Ember, followed by a visit to his apartment. Brenda always told me she was working late on a special project with her team. This Thursday would be different. I called Mike again. Need to borrow your truck one more time. He didn't ask questions. That's why we've been friends since high school. At 6:30 p.m., I was parked outside Ember, waiting. I positioned myself with a clear view of the entrance, but where Brenda wouldn't spot me. Right on schedule. David arrived first at 7:05. Brenda pulled up 5 minutes later. I gave them 30 minutes, enough time to order drinks, get comfortable, let their guard down. Then I made my move. Walking into Ember, I spotted them immediately, corner booth, heads close together, her hand resting on his arm. They didn't notice me approach. They were too wrapped up in each other. Evening, I said, standing at their table. My cheating wife panicked when I showed up, instead of her affair partner, leaving early as planned. Her face drained of color, eyes widening in shock. David froze mid-sentence, looking like he'd seen a ghost. Owen, Brenda gasped, yanking her hand away from David. Were you? How did you? Special project? I asked, my voice steady despite the rage bubbling beneath the surface. I turned to David. Is that what you're calling it these days? David stammered something about just colleagues having dinner, but his guilty expression told the real story. Save it. I cut him off. I know everything. The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners pretending not to watch the drama unfolding. I didn't care. Let them watch. Let them see what betrayal looks like. We should talk about this at home, Brenda whispered desperately, grabbing her purse. No, I said firmly. We're done talking. I've seen enough. I placed my wedding ring on the table with a soft clink. You can return yours whenever you get around to it. David finally found his voice. Look, man, this isn't what you think. You have a wife. I cut him off. And 2 kids. Does Karen know you're here? His face went pale. Please don't. I'm not going to tell her, I said. That's your mess to clean up. But if I were you, I'd be worried about who else might be watching. I turned and walked away, ignoring Brenda's tearful calls. Outside, the cool night air filled my lungs as I took my first breath as a single man again. My phone buzzed with frantic texts from Brenda, but I didn't look. Instead, I drove to a hotel downtown. I'd already packed a bag that morning, already started making arrangements for what came next. Some would call it cold, calculated. I called it self-preservation. The hotel room became my sanctuary for the next 3 days. I ignored Brenda's desperate calls and messages, 47 of them by the final count. Each one more frantic than the last, evolving from, we need to talk, to please give me a chance to explain, to I'll do anything to fix this. Fix this. As if infidelity was a broken appliance that could be repaired with the right tools. On the 3rd morning, I finally responded with a text. I'll be home at 7 to get more of my things. Be there or not, your choice. When I pulled into our driveway that evening, Brenda's car was there. I sat in my truck for a moment, steeling myself. In combat, we were taught to compartmentalize emotions, lock them away until the mission was complete. This was just another mission. She was waiting in the living room, eyes red-rimmed, hair unwashed. She jumped up when I entered. Owen, I held out my hand. I'm just here for my stuff. Please, she begged, moving toward me. Let me explain. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I walked past her to the bedroom. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. This was a choice. A series of choices, made day after day. She followed me, hovering in the doorway as I pulled a suitcase from the closet. I love you, she whispered. Not him. It was just, I don't know why I did it. I continued packing methodically, clothes, toiletries, important documents. How did you find out? She asked finally. Does it matter? I countered, zipping the suitcase closed. Would you have stopped if I hadn't caught you? Her silence was answer enough. Moving to my dresser, I collected my watches, my father's dog tags, the small wooden box containing keepsakes from my service years. Things that mattered. Things that told the story of who I was before becoming half of Owen and Brenda. What about our plans? She asked, voice breaking. The house we were saving for? The future we talked about? You burned that future to the ground, I said flatly. I'm not interested in sifting through the ashes. Where are you staying? That's not your concern anymore. She began to cry again, those tears that once would have broken my heart. Now they just fuel my resolve. I've contacted a lawyer, I told her, heading back toward the front door with my suitcase. They'll be in touch about the divorce papers. Divorce, she gasped. Owen, we can work through this. Couples therapy, a fresh start. There's only one way this ends, I said, pausing at the door. This marriage is over. Because of one mistake, she pleaded. Because I deserve better than someone who can look me in the eye every day while lying to my face. I replied, my voice hard. Because trust, once broken, never heals the same. I walked out, loaded my suitcase into the truck, and drove away without looking back. In my rearview mirror, I could see her standing in the doorway, getting smaller and smaller until she disappeared completely, just like the future I thought we had. The next morning, I woke up to 23 missed calls, not just from Brenda, but from her parents, her sister, even her mutual friends. Word had spread, and everyone seemed to have an opinion on my rash decision. Brenda was spinning her own narrative, downplaying what happened, making it sound like a momentary lapse in judgment rather than a months-long betrayal. According to her version, I was overreacting to one mistake. I'd anticipated this. In the Rangers, we were taught that perception could be weaponized. I needed to counter her offensive with irrefutable facts. I called in a favor from my buddy Jake, who worked in digital forensics. We met at a diner far from my usual haunts. You sure about this? Jake asked as he handed me a small flash drive. Once you open this box, you can't close it. I'm sure, I said, pocketing the drive. I need to know everything. Back in my hotel room, I plugged in the drive. Jake had recovered deleted texts, location data, and emails from the cloud backup of Brenda's phone, information I had legal access to through her shared account. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions. The affair hadn't been a few weeks or even months. It had been going on for over a year. The messages were explicit, detailed, unambiguous. They'd taken a weekend trip to Vancouver while I was at a military buddy's funeral. They'd been planning a future together, one that didn't include me. There were messages about me, too. Brenda complaining about our marriage, mocking things I'd said, sharing private details about our relationship. David's responses were even worse. Jokes at my expense, smug satisfaction about taking what was mine. I sat back, oddly calm despite the digital knife twisting in my gut. At least now I had certainty. At least now I had proof. I copied the most damning evidence. Nothing explicit, just enough to prove the duration and seriousness of the affair, and compose an email to Brenda's parents and sister, who had been the most vocal about me, giving her another chance. I understand you've heard Brenda's version of events. Here's the reality. This wasn't one mistake. It was hundreds of deliberate choices over more than a year. I'm sending this not to hurt anyone, but to put an end to the campaign to say a marriage that Brenda herself destroyed long ago. I attached the evidence, took a deep breath, and hit send. Within an hour, the calls from her family stopped. Instead, I received a single text from her father. I'm sorry, son. We didn't know. My phone rang again. Brenda. This time I answered. You had no right, she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. You left me no choice. I replied calmly. You weren't just cheating on me. You were trying to rewrite what happened. I'm not letting you turn me into the villain of your story. Those were private. Nothing in a marriage is private. I cut her off, especially not its destruction. The line went silent for so long I thought she'd hung up. What do you want? She finally asked, her voice hollow. A clean break, I answered. No more lies. No more games. Just sign the papers when they come. 2 weeks after exposing Brenda's affair to her family, my lawyer called to inform me the divorce papers were ready. I'd opted for a straightforward approach, equal division of assets, no alimony either way, clean break. My only non-negotiable was keeping my military pension entirely mine. She might fight this, my lawyer warned. Technically, she's entitled to a portion of your pension. She can try, I replied, but she won't win. I was staying at Mike's lake house now. He'd offered it while he was deployed overseas, a perfect sanctuary to regroup. I spent my days fishing, working out, and planning my next chapter. I'd already interviewed for a security consulting position in Colorado, far from the memories haunting me in Washington. The divorce papers had been delivered to Brenda that morning. I expected anger, perhaps more damage control. What I didn't expect was for her to show up at the lake house that evening. I was grilling steaks on the deck when her car pulled up. She stepped out looking nothing like the disheveled wreck I'd last seen. This Brenda was polished, composed, dressed in the blue sundress I'd always liked. How did you find me? I asked as she approached. Mike's wife told me. She stopped at the bottom of the deck stairs. Can we talk? Against my better judgment, I nodded toward the patio table. She sat down, declining my automatic offer of a beer. I got the papers, she said simply. And I don't want a divorce. She met my eyes steadily. I want to fight for us. I turned back to the grill, flipping the steaks to hide my disbelief. There is no us anymore, Brenda. There could be, she insisted. People make terrible mistakes, Owen. They rebuild from them too. I sat across from her, keeping the table between us. This wasn't a mistake. It was a campaign of deception that lasted over a year. I've ended it completely with David, she said. He's transferring to another office. I've started therapy to understand why I did what I did. I'm taking responsibility, Owen. Good for you, I said flatly. That's a healthy step. For you. She reached across the table for my hand. I pulled back. I know what I did was unforgivable, she continued, undeterred. But I'm asking you to try. Remember our vows? For better or worse. This isn't worse, Brenda. This is betrayal. This is you and another man laughing at me behind my back. Tears welled in her eyes. I never laughed at you. Those messages. I was trying to convince myself I wasn't making a horrible mistake. Trying to justify what couldn't be justified. For a moment, I almost wavered. The woman across from me looked like the Brenda I'd fallen in love with. Sincere, vulnerable, her heart on her sleeve. How can I prove to you that I want to make this right? She asked softly. I considered the question seriously. You can't. Some things can't be undone. You forgave soldiers who made mistakes in combat, she pressed. You believe in second chances. Combat mistakes aren't betrayals. I countered. And I never trusted those soldiers the same way again. Her expression hardened slightly. So that's it. Years together, thrown away. You threw them away. I corrected her. One decision at a time, for over a year. I'm just acknowledging what's already broken. She stood, finally accepting defeat. I'll always love you, Owen. I believe you think that's true. I replied, not unkindly. Sign the papers, Brenda. Let's at least end this with dignity. As her car disappeared down the gravel drive, I realized I felt nothing but relief. The steaks were overcooked, but somehow I didn't mind at all. A manila envelope arrived at Mike's lake house a week later. Inside were the divorce papers, signed by Brenda. No note, no last plea for reconciliation, just her signature on the dotted line. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders as I forwarded them to my lawyer. That evening, I stood on the deck watching the sunset reflect off the lake, beer in hand, contemplating the end of a chapter one never expected to close this way. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's David. Can we meet? I owe you an explanation. My first instinct was to block the number. What possible explanation could justify what he'd done? But curiosity got the better of me. Riverside Diner. Tomorrow. Noon. You get 15 minutes. The next day, I arrived early, chose a booth with a clear view of the entrance and exits. Old habits die hard. David walked in at 12:05, looking haggard and nervous. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him at Ember. Thanks for meeting me, he said, sliding into the booth. 14 minutes left, I replied coldly. He nodded, accepting the terms. Karen left me. Took the kids to her parents in Oregon. Am I supposed to feel sorry for you? No, he said quickly. You're supposed to understand I know exactly what I've lost. Just like you do. I leaned back, arms crossed. Say what you came to say. David exhaled slowly. I want to tell you that Brenda tried to break it off multiple times. She'd feel guilty in things, then I'd pursue her again. I manipulated her, used her insecurities. I'm not excusing what she did, but I was the aggressor. That changes nothing, I stated flatly. I know, he agreed. But you should know she did love you. She talked about you constantly, even when we were together, about how much she respected your integrity, your loyalty, the very thing she was betraying. I remained silent, unwilling to give him the absolution he clearly sought. I also wanted to tell you this wasn't her pattern, he continued. I checked her background when we first got involved. There were no other affairs. This was the only time she strayed. You investigated my wife. I asked incredulously. He had the decency to look ashamed. I was trying to protect myself, make sure she wasn't a habitual cheater. The irony was almost laughable. Your 15 minutes are up, I said, standing. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive. Everything's on here. All our emails, messages, everything. Delete it, keep it, whatever you want. I don't deserve to hold on to any of it. I took the drive without comment and walked out. In my truck, I sat staring at the small device in my palm. Did I need more evidence of Brenda's betrayal? More salt for the wound. I rolled down my window and flicked the flash drive into a nearby dumpster. I didn't need David's confession or his evidence. I had made my decision, and nothing would change it. That night, I accepted the job offer in Colorado. It was time to move forward, not dwell in the ruins of what once was. Colorado greeted me with clear mountain air and anonymity, exactly what I needed. The security consulting firm had set me up with a comfortable apartment in Denver with views of the Rockies. My first week was packed with training and introductions, leaving little time to dwell on the past. I'd been there a month when I received an email from Mike. Thought you should know, Brenda's leaving Washington. Took a job in Chicago. I read the message twice, surprised by my lack of reaction. No pain, no regret, just acknowledgement of information. Progress, I supposed. That weekend, I decided to explore my new home state, driving into the mountains with hiking gear and a cooler of supplies. The trail I chose was challenging, steep inclines, narrow paths along ridges, spectacular views that required effort to reach. My kind of hike. For hours in, I stopped at a scenic overlook to catch my breath. A woman was already there, her back to me as she photographed the valley below. Quite a view, I commented, keeping a respectful distance. She turned, lowering her camera. Worth every step of the climb. Her name was Allison, a geology professor at the University of Colorado. She'd moved from Texas 2 years prior, drawn by the mountains and research opportunities. We ended up hiking the remaining trail together, conversation flowing easily. You're new to Colorado, she observed as we descended. Not a question, but an accurate assessment. That obvious. She smiled. You're still marveling at things locals take for granted. It's refreshing, actually. At the trailhead, I found myself reluctant to end our conversation. There's a decent cafe in town, if you'd like to grab some coffee. I know the place, she replied. Best maple scones in the county. Over coffee, I gave her the abbreviated version of what brought me to Colorado. No dramatic details, just the essentials. Marriage ended, needed a fresh start. Brave move, she said. Most people stay stuck in familiar misery rather than risk uncertain happiness. Military training, I shrugged. When the current position becomes untenable, you relocate and regroup. Her eyes sparkled with intelligence. Is that what you're doing? Regrouping. For now, I admitted. What comes next is still a work in progress. We exchanged numbers before parting ways. Whether anything would come of it, I couldn't say. But for the first time since the divorce, I felt a flicker of possibility. That evening, I received a text from Brenda, the first contact in months. I heard you're in Colorado now. I hope you're finding what you're looking for. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for everything. I stared at the message for a long time before typing a simple reply. I wish you well in Chicago. And surprisingly, I meant it. The rage that had once consumed me had faded, leaving not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of detached peace. Her actions had shaped my path, but they no longer defined it. The next morning, I woke early and headed to a real estate office I'd noticed downtown. It was time to stop thinking of Colorado as a refuge and start seeing it as home. Time to build something permanent again, this time on a stronger foundation. The mountains outside my window weren't just an escape anymore. They were promise. Of challenge, of beauty, of heights still to climb. 1 year to the day after I discovered Brenda's affair, I stood on the deck of my new mountain home, watching the sunrise paint the Rockies in shades of gold and amber. The cabin had been a fixer-upper, work I'd embraced as both therapy and investment. Now it was mine, rebuilt on my terms, much like my life. My phone buzzed with a text from Allison. Still on for dinner tonight? Mom's excited to meet you. Meeting her parents, a step I hadn't anticipated taking again. Yet here I was, 6 months into a relationship built on honesty and mutual respect. Allison knew my story, had given me space when I needed it, challenged me when I tried to retreat behind walls built from past betrayals. Wouldn't miss it, I replied, just finishing up some paperwork first. The paperwork in question sat on my desk inside. Final documents from the security firm confirming my promotion to regional director. My team had quickly become the company's top performers, handling contracts for everything from corporate security assessments to specialized training for private clients. As I signed the acceptance letter, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. The pain that once consumed me had faded to an occasional dull ache, a reminder of lessons learned rather than wounds still healing. I'd received a Christmas card from Brenda 2 months ago. She'd remarried, found a good position in Chicago, seemed happy. I felt nothing but a detached kind of goodwill toward her. The chain of anger that once bound us had broken, setting us both free. That evening, as Alice and I drove to her parents' home, she reached over and squeezed my hand. "Penny for your thoughts," she said. "You've been quiet today." "Just thinking about patterns," I replied. "How easy it is to miss them until you step back far enough to see the whole picture." "And what pattern are you seeing now?" she asked, genuinely curious. "That trust isn't naive," I said after a moment. "It's a choice you make with open eyes. And when it's broken, you don't have to let it break you too." She smiled, understanding more than I'd said. Pretty profound for a security expert. Rangers are philosophical that way, I joked. Later that night, after a successful dinner with her parents, we walked along a trail near their home, the moon bright enough to light our path. "I have something for you," Allison said, pulling a small box from her pocket. An anniversary gift, of sorts. Inside was a compass, beautifully crafted, with an inscription on the back. "Not all who wander are lost. For your hiking adventures," she explained. "And maybe as a reminder that sometimes the difficult paths lead to the best destinations." I pulled her close, overwhelmed by the simple thoughtfulness of the gift, and by how accurately it represented my journey. If there's one lesson I've learned from all of this, it's that betrayal doesn't define you unless you let it. The map of my life had been redrawn, unexpected detours included, but the direction was clear now. Forward. Always forward. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was genuinely excited to see where the path would lead.
Bye.